Context is a really, really central concept which you bring in there, because I quite often say, only half jokingly, that context is everything. So my background is from the world of theater. I'm a theater director by education and background, and I still like to work in a black box with people sitting on chairs and so on. But as the other performer you have invited to this year's ArtEx conference seminar, Jan Jönsson, as he will show, the context of which you place an utterance, a creative utterance, a project, if you want, can be immensely both complicating and enriching to the project if you work outside the comfort zone of art spaces. So I'm going to talk about that. I think especially in our crazy times of all forms of mass psychosis and peer pressure, I think having the opportunity to feel that you are not alone if you harbor some doubts and some skepticism towards the prevailing mood, that you are not alone. And I think maybe that is the dream that we all share. And that, my dear friends, is what we call suspense. That is the moment that is on the in-breathing, the moment where we don't know what is going to happen. What the Soviet theater director Meyerhold called atkaz, what we in Norwegian call sats, or ta sats, getting out of the ski jumper's jump, so to speak. What I'm doing now is suspense. And that energy, that moment, on the in-breathing, where we don't know what is going to happen and that everything and anything can happen, is the moment, I think, that we all are searching and looking for in the depths of our artist hearts. Young artist heart and old artist heart. So, my name is Morten Traavik. I am by education a theater director. I still do what people would say ordinary theater in ordinary theater buildings for people sitting on chairs. But after I had my epiphany, my, you could say, aha moment, as we say in Norway, going back to the safe spaces of cultural buildings and institutions feels a little bit like a Sunday football in the park. I enjoy it, it's fun, it's exercise, but once you have been smitten by the virus of reality, it's very hard to go back, because you will keep chasing the next big kick. And today I will share with you some of my kicks. I don't know if it will be a kick for you, but we will see very soon. I will also talk a bit about something which at least has been important for me, and I hope will also feel relevant for you as aspiring talents and artists in this context, which is being on the inside versus being on the outside. And I will propagandize my theory that an artist needs to be both at once. You cannot be too much on the inside because it will corrupt you, and you cannot be too much on the outside because it will wither away. You need to have a leg in both of those sides, on both sides of the huge divide that, not least these days, are haunting our world. What you heard was the silly old pop ditty from some of us youths. I saw some of you, the people with less hair in the audience, were nodding and smiling when you heard that theme. The theme is by Opus, and quite cheesy Austrian pop band from the 80s. This was their one and only hit, called Live is Life. And I think also, in many ways, it might be appropriate as the starting point in this crazy, crazy times of distancing and fear and loathing and infection and non-infection, that we start with live is life, because it is, and you all know this, and it will not stop being so, no matter how many Zoom conferences we keep pouring out at each other. One day we will all meet again. Don't know where, don't know when, but we will meet again some sunny day. All right, enough with the sentimentality. Let's get down to business. We started with the original, Live is Life. And as artist colleagues, another concept that I think will be of familiarity to you is the concept of interpretation. You have the way of creativity, which is to build from scratch, so to speak, to invent something which you then develop. And then you have the concept of interpretation, which is reimagining, at least at its best, reimagining, sometimes just plagiarizing, but reimagining the work of other artists, of artists' colleagues, of the giants on whose shoulders we sometimes stand, steadily or unsteadily. And this original by Opus, I will soon replay for you in a reimagining by an artist collective that kind of are, to the extent that I have any gurus, any teachers at all, because I'm so old now that I'm too old for gurus and teachers, but the ones who inspired my creative outlook in a quite decisive way. Their way is the way of criticism from within and not from without. So, without further ado, I give you the ex-Yugoslav dissident avant-garde art activists Laibach, who will now perform their version of Life is Life. Maestro?
Life. Life is life. Life. Life is life. When we all give the power, we all give the best. Every minute in the hour, we don't think about the rest. And we all get the power, we all get the best. When everyone gives everything, then everything will get. Life. Life is life. Life. Life is life. Life is life when we all feel the pain. Life is life, it's the feeling of the people. Life is life, it's the feeling of the land. When we all give the power, we all give the best. Every minute in the hour, we don't think about the rest. When we all give the power, we all give the best. And everyone gives everything and every soul. Everyone will feel life. Life is life.
Okay, I think that's enough for today. And I think you got the point about interpretation. And I will not explain more to you how to interpret that clip, because I think you are, I don't know if you are intelligent, but at least I know that you are sensitive people. And some things are interpreted just as well by the heart as with the mind. So listen to your heart and what it tells you, and whatever it tells you, it will be just as valid interpretation as mine. So this is why I could explain, but I won't. But what Laibach does do, which I think is worth mentioning, is that they bring out, by reimagining and reinterpreting, they bring out a meaning of a seemingly innocuous, sweet, you could say even a bit hippie-ish song about having a good time at the concert. When we all give the power, we all give the best. Every minute of the hour, we don't think about the rest. About being in the moment. And they transform it into a quite, well, I mean, this is just my personal experience, but both scary and sexy. Dark hymn to the darker sides of being together, which are mass movements. And of course, you know, if you follow that path, we are already in the contested landscape of the big isms of socialism, fascism, suprematism, and so on. And does Laibach criticize this, or do they celebrate it, or do they both? And that, my friends, brings us into another very important principle, and that's the principle of ambiguity, of double messages. More meanings than one meaning at the same time. In those days, before Marcel Duchamp put his glorious pissoir, ready-made, in 1912 on display, and blew apart the whole concept of what art is and isn't. It was okay. You could get away with classifying something as art and something as unart. Nowadays, art basically is anything you can get away with, including this lecture, by the way. So when we bring in an expression that is ambiguous and that makes us doubt not just the outside reality, but also our inner reality, then, to my mind, we are into some interesting territories about what creativity is and should be. I will share with you now my epiphany, you could say, the project that brought me, I think, forever and irreversibly into the huge open landscapes of sourcing my material from the outside world, not mainly from the dramatists, although there are dramatists that also are like a god to me. A dramatist that said, among other very wise things, that living is fighting with trolls. Fighting with trolls in the heart and in the mind, And by heart and mind, he meant the hearts and minds of others, but also his own hearts and minds. You need to have this double-edged sword hanging over you if you want to call yourself an activist artist. This is my claim. You might disagree, but there are many opinions, and this is mine. So now we'll share with you a trailer from a Canadian documentary about my first, you could say, intervention into outside reality, for real. It all started because I had a girlfriend at the time whose father is the former Minister of Culture in Angola, in Southwest Africa. And Angola is a country that has a huge problem, or at least at the time had a huge problem, with leftover landmines after one of Africa's longest civil wars. And through my love connection, I ended up in Angola, and I saw firsthand the consequences of the landmine problem on the population, and also not only the population, but in these corona times, also on the minds of people living in a country littered by landmines, what it does to your perception of your everyday life and your sense of exposure and uncertainty. At the same time, I was invited to be the judge in a homemade beauty pageant that took place in the back street behind the house where we lived on New Year's Eve. And being, you know, a nice Scandinavian boy, I'm raised in the tradition that beauty pageants are the second worst thing after hell, basically. So I, of course, had all my luggage and prejudices, but being a judge in that homemade backstreet pageant with girls of all shades of white to beige to black and all body shapes, showed me that even the most challenging concepts can surprise you and turn out to be much more inclusive than what you expected them to be. So then when I was asked to come up with a concept for the biannual Luanda Arts Festival, when it started up after the Civil War, I took two seemingly opposite, or at least very irreconcilable elements, the beauty pageant and landmines, and I came up with the beauty pageant Miss Landmine. And that was a concept that was first realized in Angola in 2007, after years of networking, having meetings with everybody from aid workers to war criminals to secure support for the project. We had the first pageant in Angola, and then I continued the project in Cambodia in another context, because context is everything. You can do the same thing, exactly the same project, which I did. As long as you change the context, it becomes something else, which you soon will see. So this trailer is from the documentary, Canadian-produced Miss Landmine, which was aired first time in 2010. She has the most beautiful hair in all of Kampong Cham province. You are looking very, very good, just so that you know it. If the government makes a couple of phone calls, we have many possibilities.
So you're doing a flesh market with amputees. Hallelujah, Morten.
The Prime Minister has issued a public decree. These guys kill and imprison dissidents. That was a trailer for the Canadian documentary Miss Landmine from 2010, which deals with my first huge leap into social and political reality using theatrical methods, you could say. And as I was talking about before the trailer, one of the things that project showed me is that you can actually repeat the same concept, basically the same form and format almost endlessly, but if you change the context, if you change the context, the place, the culture, the time in which this project takes place, and you do it outside our safe spaces of art, weird and wonderful and scary things can and will happen and will influence your project. So the outcomes of the 2 times we realized the Miss Landmine project, first in Angola in southwestern Africa, and then in Cambodia in Southeast Asia. In Angola, we had the then First Lady, Ana Paula dos Santos, the wife of the president, crowning the winner in a very, very glitzy, high-profile event in the most prestigious venue in all of Luanda, and everybody were there. So the government, one of the most corrupt in the world, stood totally behind this whole concept and even financed it. And I think I'm proud to say that that is perhaps the first time an African government has financed an initiative by a white do-gooder and not the other way around. So that's also a first. Then you can of course problematize what was in it for the Angolan government. And there are many reasons to do so. But the fact is that we managed to do it. And I had to get my hands dirty, and sometimes my feet too, but we managed to do it. And this is another principle for you that would like to dip your toes in the ocean of reality, is that don't expect to stay clean, because you can't. And it's also bad for your project, because interesting projects are not clean of this kind that I'm talking about. There are many other arts projects. Don't get me wrong. By God, I do not want everybody to run naked in the streets, rubbing their bodies with taxpayers' money and shouting down with patriarchy. I do not want that. This is not what I'm trying to achieve. So if you are comfortable by playing the cello in an orchestra, that's totally fine. But I can only talk about artistic strategies from our own horizon, of course, and hope that the personal will become universal and political. Because this is also what we hope for, isn't it? To reach across to the hearts and minds of others, of you, so that we can be together for a short while. Maybe just some moments. So, in Angola, total success, or success, depending on your point of view. In Cambodia, as you saw, the Prime Minister himself intervened, and he's a very powerful man. You don't mess with Hun Sen. Those who did, many of them are no longer with us. So the Prime Minister intervened and banned the whole project just some days before the final event was going to take place. And the interesting paradox is that the ones prompting him to ban the project were not Cambodians themselves, were not the ladies taking part. It was the bald guy, the Voldemort of this story that you see in the clip, who thought that I came and stepped on his territory. He is an aid worker who runs, or at least at the time ran, an aid organization dedicated to people hurt by landmines. So again, there are blurred lines between good and bad, and hunter and prey, and perpetrator and victim. All of these gray zones are a tremendous resource for your work. I usually say that, as long as you have dilemmas, hypocrisy, double meanings as your main resource, You don't need to look to the sky for truth. You just need to look across the room at your fellow human beings. And in the mirror at yourself. This is equally important. So, the experience, the field experience that the Miss Landman project gave me inspired me to create another social intervention, but then something that in a kind of way try to tackle the situation of aid workers. Because, as you know, being as fortunate as we are, living in the part of the world that we are, we usually see the whole concept of charity and aid and assistance to less fortunate societies and countries as a one-way transaction. But it's not. And this I wanted to touch upon with my next project, where I took, again, an established popular cultural form, namely the charity single, the We Are the World, Do They Know It's Christmas? And I invited all of Zambia's greatest pop stars to record a song to the benefit of all the aid workers out there. So I give you Pimp My Aid Worker. And with that white angel hand in a sea of neediness, we'll move on. Which brings me also to another, I guess, red thread, another leitmotif of my methodology is that, as you have already observed, I am quite often a part of my own work in a very visible way. And I know that you will not believe me when I say, at least try to make you believe that it's not mainly because I like it. It's actually because sometimes nobody else wants to do it. And nobody else can do it. And this video is an example of that. I really tried to recruit a real-life aid worker to put on the wings, but life was too short, simply, for that to happen. But then again, for more weighty reasons than artist narcissism, of which I am definitely a subscriber and an addict, I think that being responsible for your work, that showing that you are ready to meet the reactions of your work is another essential and honorable way of relating to your own work taking place out in the real world with consequences for real people. You have to be responsible. You cannot, and here I'm almost getting a bit agitated, you cannot, if the world kicks you back, if you say, freak you to the world, and the world says, freak you back, you cannot run to mommy, the state, or the curator, or the art space, and say, no, it was just art. That is not an honorable thing to do. And what is worse, you completely discredit the potential power of what you are doing. So don't do that. If you do that, as the great Astrid Lindgren wrote in her brother's Lionheart, there are things that are dangerous and scary. But you have to do them, because if you don't, then you're not the person, you are just a little turd. Suck on that. Anyway, we will go on. And I will again return to the inside-outside issue. Because I believe, firmly believe, and everything I do and have done only strengthens this belief, that if you want to change something, and remember, you don't need to, but if you want to, sometimes you might get further raging within the machine than outside it. If you want to play bass guitar in a basement somewhere, that's fine. And if you want to play Occupy Wall Street bass guitar in a basement somewhere, or sit with your peers and camp out in front of the Central Stock Exchange, that's fine. But I don't necessarily believe it changes as much as you putting on a suit and going into the stock exchange and investing in some stocks and maybe starting a company. Then you are on the inside in a completely different manner, and it is also much more challenging to work from the inside than the outside, is my claim here today, for the sake of argument, because it might corrupt you. Opposition is fine, and we need opposition, always. But, and this is a big but, opposition is also, can be, a comfort zone. Not so much in those societies in which I work and experience quite often, because there often quite essential things are at stake. Your work, at the very least, but quite often also your life. So there I would say there is not so much a problem of this kind. But here in our first world, and in our uniquely generously state-subsidized arts environment in Norway, I have to say, open-heartedly, that I'm a little bit worried that we are becoming too soft. We are not, and I think quite a lot of the artistic discourse in my homeland Norway and in some other societies like Norway over the last couple of years have shown exactly that we are becoming too soft. Our six-packs are going. We need to trim ourselves again, quite relentlessly, as they did in Sparta. So, what I mean by that is that opposition can sometimes be a comfort zone, because you know that that whoever you are opposing will not hit you back. You know also that you are in the quite safe company of like-minded people, and you know, especially in the advent of social media, that you can collect likes for it by like-minded people. So that is not what I would call opposition. Opposition is something where you oppose also yourself and the people who think like you. So there. I think this is a good moment for some light music before we get far too serious. So I will then go on to the next intervention, inwards and outwards, and I will show you a YouTube clip that I actually have the audacity to expect that maybe some of you have even seen already. This is the Kumsong Music School of Pyongyang, North Korea, performing a rather well-known Norwegian pop song. Yes, that was the Kom Song Music School of Pyongyang, North Korea, or as it's formally known, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, performing their interpretation of a-ha's Take on Me, recorded by me in Pyongyang in the autumn of 2011. And that clip has soon gone viral and seen and aired and sourced in quite many contexts around the world. Because of our time limits, I can not tell you too much about my entry into North Korea. And besides, I would have to kill you after. So I will jump straight to the projects that I am known for having conducted, that also have not exactly passed quietly under the radar, and were never intended to, of course. One of the things I wanted to test out was the quite established narrative, and you might say stereotype, of North Korea as a country where Western or so-called Western culture is totally prohibited. And I did so by, on a Friday, and I'm not making this up, on a Friday, or maybe it was on a Thursday, I gave the CD of Hunting High and Low, the first full-length album of a-ha. I gave it to the teacher of these 5 young accordionists that you see performing. And I said, can you do a cover version of, an interpretation, of course, because they don't have the expression cover version. Can you do an interpretation of this track? So I gave them the CD, because as you can imagine, there were not many scores for accordion for Take on Me by a-ha at the time. Now it is, for 5 accordions, but at that time it wasn't. And I gave it to them, and I said, can you do something with this? And they say, maybe. And then I can come back on Monday. And I came back on Monday and I recorded this. So, yeah, that's efficiency for you, which probably would not be possible in a democracy. The North Korea experience, and you might say the outcome of this experiment, of course, inspired me to continue exploring the boundaries of what can be done and not be done in a country like North Korea. So the next year I had the opportunity to invite a group of North Korean accordionists who were the same as you saw, but also 2 mass games instructors. And in North Korea, I think you might have seen, this is one of the memes that North Korea is most well known for, these huge mass gymnastics events where hundreds of thousands of performers are in total unison doing complex choreographies to the background of 15,000 14-year-olds flipping colored books to make up these huge pixelated living backdrop pictures. And I thought, that's a great concept. We need to get that to Norway. So for the International Arts Festival Barent Spektakel, which takes place in Kirkenes, in northern Norway, right on the border with Russia, in an area that, if any area in Norway has been affected by the Cold War period, it's this area. So it was also contextually a very, I would say, appropriate place. So I brought these mass gymnastics to Kirkenes, and this is what happened.
En hel verden har oppfattet bildene fra Nord-Korea som fremmede og absurde etter at Kim Jong-il døde i desember.
Det jeg ikke helt skjønner, hvordan det kan virke absurd. Jeg skjønner at det kan virke fremmedartet, men vi har jo publikum på en Michael Jackson-konsert, for eksempel, som oppfører seg på nøyaktig samme måte, uten at vi synes det er absurd.
Kunstneren Morten Traavik ønsker å utfordre Vestens forestilling om det som regnes som verdens mest lukkede land.
Om det nå er gjennomtenkt eller ikke, så har de jo valgt en veldig effektiv PR-strategi, nemlig leave them wanting more.
Siden 2008 har han vært på jevnlige besøk i landet og fått tillit. Da han la ut en trekkspillversjon av A-has Take On Me, resulterte det i noe så sjeldent som en nordkoreansk YouTube-hit. Før en uke var gått, hadde 1 million mennesker sett klippet.
Det er en sammenstilling av en nordkoreansk form og nordkoreanske ferdigheter, men med et innhold som vi kjenner oss igjen i.
Nå er han på Barents Spektakel i Kirkenes og samarbeider med Komiteen for kulturell utveksling med fremmede land. En del av prosjektet er å sette norgesrekord med å bygge opp et bilde med 256 levende piksler.
Her har vi da bygd opp en snøtribune som alle de deltakerne som skal være de menneskelige pikslene i billedspillet skal stå på. Det ser svært ut.
Svært i norske forhold, men kanskje ikke så stort i forhold til hva nordkoreanerne er vant til?
Nei, Nordkorea er jo dette her sånn barnehagestørrelse.
Hei, jeg heter Morten Traavik. Alt dette her er min feil.
For å danne bildet stiller lokalbefolkningen, folkeskoleelever og garnisonen Sør-Varanger relativt frivillig opp.
Jeg vet ikke egentlig hva vi driver med, men det høres jo veldig spennende ut.
Så skal vi begynne å dele ut katalogene. Herifra og ut så er det kjempeviktig å memorere sin plassering, og ikke minst sitt nummer på katalogen. Har vi det bra, ja eller nei? Ja! Er det kaldt, ja eller nei? Ja!
Pyongyang is cold and here is cold, but I can feel the warm heart of the Norwegian people. We are not here to teach you, but we are here to develop and exchange so that we can make friendship, we can make relationship in the field of culture.
For Traavik har forholdet blitt mer enn rent profesjonelt.
Jeg vil beskrive det som veldig hjertelig, og jeg regner flere av de som gode venner. Jeg er alltid intenst bakfull når jeg har vært i Nord-Korea.
Men ikke alle synes det er en like god idé å øve 3 timer i 20 minusgrader.
Fritida vi rekrutter har, og bruker den til å sette oss ut i kulda her og fryse enda litt mer.
Jeg trodde dette dere likte å gjøre på fritida.
Nei, ikke faen.
Sitter ikke dere bare i varmestua på jobben og...
Har du måttet gå på akkord med deg selv for å få den tilliten til de kreftene i Nord-Korea du har gjort?
Det er et godt og viktig spørsmål, og svaret på det er nei. Ikke et eneste sekund.
Hva slags inntrykk sitter du igjen med i forhold til regimet i Nord-Korea?
Du skjønner sikkert at jeg ikke kan uttale meg alt for tydelig og klart om min mening om det politiske systemet i Nord-Korea. Men det jeg kan si, det er at det går an å få til å gjøre mange flere ting i Nord-Korea enn det folk flest tror.
Yes. I am a follower of the gospel of working together. I admit it. I think that there are few things more potentially powerful in creating common understanding than working together on a specific project. And if it's a creative project, even better. Because that's, since creativity is something so closely connected with our personal selves, if you work together in a creative project, you cannot help but showing a little bit of who you are and what you are to each other. So this is also why I think that politics is actually far too important to be left to the politicians. It needs a solid dose of creativity in it that regrettably so far has not been exploited to its full potential, but here I am, you know. So since our time limit today is what it is, I will not spend too much time on elaborating on my Korean experience, which lasted 7 years and forged some friendships that were and are for life. Some of those friends are not with us anymore, and things like that happen when you work in places like that. To reconnect the narrative to one of the threads that we laid out initially, after some years and conducting gradually more, you could say, ambiguous and complex projects that were also criticized heavily, especially from our own side, from the both political and also some fellow artists who thought that I was being a useful idiot for the most evil regime on earth. And to an extent, they were probably right, but only to an extent and only partially. Because you might have to be a useful idiot in the short term to accomplish things in the longer term. Again, we return to the point of being on the inside without getting too corrupted. And that is the challenge. That is the challenge I am putting to you if you're serious about changing something for real and not only posting your profile picture with whatever is on Facebook with whatever is the prevailing, trending, charitable and noble cause of the day. You need to be able to get dirty, and you need to dance with the devil in the pale moonlight if you want to get things done in the world outside our artists' creative comfort zone. Yeah, so before it gets too serious again, sorry, the mask came off, I'll put it back on again. Q 3 years later, and after a year of negotiations and many near, very, very near failures, the first rock band ever came to North Korea to perform. And it was not just any other rock band. It was, as you will remember from the start, my old heroes, inspirations, Laibach. And what I will show now is one of the trailers for the documentary Liberation Day, which I am the co-director of. I was also, of course, the director of the whole project, and which came out in 2016, but has traveled the world since then and still is, actually. And this will give you a small glimpse of that.
The reclusive state has sentenced detained American to 15 years of hard labor.
Life is life.
There's another country, another
planet.
Yes, planet.
Life is life.
Life is a terrible problem. We cannot invite you here.
We rise, we grow.
He wanted to beat him up,
We walk
and so did I.
We never fall.
We'll have a discussion. Sorry.
Biggest disguise
Jesus.
as far as the door. We walk,
People wanted to just sabotage this and looking for the smallest excuse to shut the whole thing down.
we sleep, we dream. With no timing.
Yes, and just to assure you doubly that this actually happened, I want to play another clip on the hoof, and that is from the BBC. So just so that you know that it actually happened, that this is not just me making this adventure up.
With so many light years to go, it's a final countdown.
There are all kinds of music. Now we know that there's this kind of music too.
Small and white, clean and bright, you look happy to me.
Of course, this is very different to our tastes, but it was quite nice to hear a traditional song.
I think we did more than we expected in the end. I don't know how much will that kind of, what kind of trace will that leave here, but it's a big step for, it's a small step for life and a big step for humanity.
Yeah, and the reason why I wanted to show this clip as well was because it shows some of the reactions of the poor audience that debuted with Western rock music, not softly, you could say. It was definitely a flying start. And quite often people have asked in connection to the film and in connection to my work in North Korea, but what did you achieve? Did you achieve something? What did you change? And I will let this wise and very wily gentleman that you saw in the previous clip answer for me. Because he was asked by the BBC correspondent, what did you think of the concert? And he lives in a totalitarian society. He knows that whatever he says, it will be noticed. He knows that he is on a balancing act. And he answers, there are many kinds of music in the world. Now we know that there's this kind of music. And no more, no less than that is what you can possibly hope to achieve. Not necessarily a revolution, not a changing of the environmental policies of Brazil, but that people know that there is such an idea in the world. Nothing more and nothing less. Then, on that note, I think our time for today has come. We could have talked about a million other things, but if I have not made too much a fool of myself, maybe we'll do that next year. I want to thank the Talent Norway and the ArtEx for inviting me, and again underline the importance of meeting, either in the minds or in the flesh, but meeting. So I salute you and you. Thank you.